Hi, I'm Franklin, and this is Law School Strategy, How I Graduated from Law School with a Job. How I Graduated from Law School is a series of interviews with practicing attorneys and legal professionals to find out more about their career journey. The purpose is for you to hear more about how other legal professionals became employed and started their career following law school, or, in some cases, how they relaunched their careers at a later stage in their professional life. It's not just young lawyers that we'll be talking with, but attorneys of across all levels of experience and practice areas. The purpose is not to try to prove the job market is perfect, because it's not, or to convince you it's easy to get a job and there are tons of jobs out there, because there simply aren't. However, I do hope you gain some insights, ideas, tips, or other pieces of advice that can help you and your law school strategy. Because I do believe that if you work hard, follow the advice that we share, you'll be closer than ever to graduating from law school with a job. On this episode, we have attorney Keith Lee from Birmingham, Alabama. Hey, Keith.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well. Thanks for having you on. I'm glad we get to talk about and hear about your experience. So let's kick it off with the first question. What did you do or study before law school, and then why did you end up going to law school?
I went to UAB here in Birmingham, or I went to Alabama, then finished up at UAB. I studied history and poli-sci, so I'm a very standard lawyer guy. And then I took a break. I actually worked for a year as essentially a gopher project assistant runner for a fairly large firm down here in Alabama for a year right after college, and was planning to go to law school immediately thereafter, but I kind of stopped for a moment then and was like, man, I've been in school my entire life, and do I really have to go to law school right now, or should I take some time to be in my 20s, which I'll never be able to do again. So I did, and I decided that I would be better suited to just kind of do stuff for a while. So I worked a variety, nothing significant, but just a few random jobs. I lived in Canada for a year, and got married. And then right after I got married, kind of decided, I think I was 28 when I went to law school.
So where did you go to law school?
Birmingham School of Law down here in Birmingham. And I had always thought about being a lawyer. It was never sort of a question in my mind. It just always felt like the right thing for me to do. I'm a voracious reader. And like someone, I can't remember, someone much more famous and well thought said that being a lawyer is like doing homework for a living. And, you don't need to do it unless you're, want to do homework for a living. And, being in history and poli-sci and reading a lot and writing a lot, I enjoyed all that stuff. And I was like, I like homework. That sounds good. So, I went for it.
Nice. So you got through law school, and we're going to ask the question now that everybody wants to know. Did you graduate from law school with a job? And if so, how did you get that job after law school?
I did. I graduated law school with a job. I did that by virtue of clerking for the same law firm all through law school. I kept working there the entire time. It was a small, it continues to be a smaller insurance defense firm. And right as I started law school and my clerkship and when I joined the firm, it was like they had been in business like 3 months. And it was a spin-off from a more established firm, standard lawyer thing. A couple partners were like, we're done. We're going to do our own thing.
And so how did you get connected to them?
Through my school job board, just straight up. I mean, they was on the school employment board, and I sent an application and went in, and I guess interviewed well and was there. And then, when I got done, they were like, we've got an associate position waiting for you when you graduate and pass the bar. And it kind of went according to plan. So it was good.
That's pretty cool. That's a great way to promote the job board. I always try to tell people and law students to actually look at your job board that your law school is
Oh yeah.
posting, because those are people that actually want to hire from that school. So, did you notice that the attorneys that you were working underneath had connections to your current school, or were they just from other local area schools, or from not even in Alabama even?
They were the managing partner was from here, from Birmingham, but a couple of other lawyers were not from Birmingham. And I mean, it was they purely put it up. I mean, I think they put up the job on a couple of the local law schools here boards, and they were casting a wide net and trying to be open to multiple sources, and I won. So
Awesome. So that was your time during law school, and then also your
mhm,
time afterwards. So did you do any
right.
other extracurricular activities or any other involvement or externships besides that?
No, that was all I did. I worked there, went to school. Like I said, I was married. In my third year, my wife and I got pregnant with our first and only child. So it was like law school, working, baby. Oh, and I started Associates Mind in that year too. So
Wow. Okay. So that was quite a big eventful
yeah,
year. So
yep.
so let's go back to law school. So were there any times that you struggled or faced any challenges during law school, or even in that job search? It doesn't really sound like you did in the job search, but what about during law school? Were there any issues or challenges you had to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, again, because I think I went later, and like I just said, I was married and had a baby. I had a lot of extraneous pressure going on that I think if you speak to your, not to be disparaging, but to your typical KJD, as someone who went kindergarten to law school, um, you
Yeah.
know, they, they're just like, they're still like, oh, let's go to law school prom and stuff. And I'm like, I ain't got time for that. Or the barrister's ball. Sorry, everyone just called it law school prom. Um, and uh, that was a challenge because, I'm a little bit older and I was in a different situation and had a newborn baby, and working and law school. And, that's stressful, but, it's just part of it. It wasn't, I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm dying. I mean, I was tired and everything, but, um, it was what it was. And, the best, put a best face forward on it. So,
Yeah, certainly. So during that time frame, you mentioned towards the end of your law school career, you were starting the Associates Mind blog. Can you kind of talk as to what went behind that decision making? Why did you want to start the blog? Was it the same thing that it is now?
yeah, so I started Associates Mind. Wow, this will be 7 years ago this year. Man, that makes me feel old. That's been doing it for 7 years. And at the time that was kind of, that wasn't peak legal blogs, but that was kind of towards the tail end when legal blogs were really like blowing up and they were really significant. And there were a lot of people doing it. And not that they're not still now, but there was a bust community, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And at seeing it all go on, and I was looking for stuff I was interested in, essentially, how to be a good new lawyer. I was going to be an associate. How do I be a good associate? Where, and I mean, don't get me wrong, Above the Law was there, but that was not actually anything that would help me actually be a better lawyer. And I love David and Ellie and everybody over there. I'm not trying to hate on them. And I mean, I wrote for Above the Law for years, so I'm certainly not trying to hate on them, but not where I was like, this is where I'm going to go to try and learn to be a better lawyer. So I finally decided I would just do it myself. And I mean, the other reason was, I felt like even though I knew I was going to have a job, I felt like it was important to do something to begin to try and distinguish myself, to try and differentiate myself from every other law student, because there were so many of us, and I graduated in 2010, which was like still in the crap years. of everyone was like, oh, this is awful. And so I decided to start Associate's Mind to try and, you know, show that I had some qualities that were good and put myself on display. And after a lot of thought, you know, I thought about a lot of different things I could start. You know, should I try and start on some practice area? You know, like I said, I was at an insurance defense firm at the time, but it was just like talking about anything else felt like would have been disingenuous because, you know, I'm not you know, when I was in my third year of law school, I was not an expert in some practice area, right? You know, the one thing I could say I could claim any expertise in was that I was, you know, there's pup who didn't know anything. So, and was trying to learn about how to make myself be better. So why don't I start a blog about
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah, well, that's great. That's a great story to kind of go along with why you started that. So, going along that same avenue of enhancing your background and your prestige in the field, you obviously have become involved in the American Bar Association. So, one of the things that when I was a law student, I went to Belmont, and at the time, I was part of the first class going through, so we didn't have accreditation from them. We were seeking it, but we didn't have even provisional at that point. So I had to join as they had some type of associate member, I think, or associate student. That's how I was able to join. But I was just wondering, so you coming from a school like Birmingham School of Law, what has it been like getting involved in the ABA? Because I know a lot of law students don't go the accreditation route when it comes to a law school. So can you explain kind of what went into that as well and how you got involved in the ABA beyond that?
Sure. They came to me. You know, they were like,
That's
you're,
convenient.
yeah. I mean, you know, there's a MIT PhD professor, and he's written a number of books. A guy named Cal Newport. Have you heard of him? Cal Newport?
No, I have not. I'll certainly look it up though.
He's written a number of books about performance and studying and grading, and then he also writes about job performance. And you know, he's a very accomplished guy. He's had a bunch of op-eds in the New York Times recently and all types of stuff. Anyway, he wrote a book recently, and the title, or a couple of years ago, and the title of the book was a quote from Steve Martin. And the premise of it was Steve Martin, the actor,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
comedian,
definitely.
that there's a story Steve Martin tells. People come up to him and you know, people in Hollywood are like, hey, you know, how can I make it? How can I make my break? You know, how can I get it? And everyone's always trying to look for like some secret in some way, like some. And Steve Martin says, like, you know, people ask me that a lot, and no one ever likes my answer. And you know, people are like, well, you know, what's your answer? So my answer is be so good they can't ignore you, which is a pretty interesting way to think about things, saying that, you know, just be excellent at what you do. Be so excellent at what you do that it starts to become impossible not to address you. And not that I'm some super excellent thing, but I was persistent. I kept at it. I kept doing it. And the ABA came to me and was like, hey, you know, we had surveyed the young lawyer division and asked them where they go for news and where they go for information and updates. And I think they were secretly hoping it was going to be the ABA Journal. It was not. And, you know, it was like above the law and stuff like that. So so they came to me and, you know, we're like, we really like what you're doing. We like everything about it. So would you write a book for us? And I was like, or they were like, have you ever thought of writing a book? And I was like, yeah, I've thought of writing a book. And so we went through that process, and that got me more involved. I got involved in the leadership committee for a long time. I was an editor for not the journal. I was one of an assistant editor for the Student Lawyer, which is the magazine they do for law students for a year.
Yeah.
And I've been on a number of other committees here and there, but yeah, it was good. So, I mean, it was purely a matter of and they came to me. So
Great. I love the fact that like you kind of distinguished yourself. You came from a background where you recognized you were a young attorney and a young law student, and you didn't have much to offer other than your writing abilities, and you kind of put that to good use and promoted yourself. And like you said, you stuck at it, and I think that's the important part. So very important lesson there. So I've got one more question for you, and then we'll wrap it up. But what advice would you share to law students or recent graduates about finding a job?
The biggest thing, I think, I'm not going to give my normal, totally snarky, cynical answer to that question. I don't wake up. I'll try and give something productive. The biggest thing, I think, is in the fact that most of the legal jobs you want to get or that people think would be ideal. All right, so let me back it up even more. There's obviously OCI, right? If you're the type of student who has stellar grades and you're on law review, and trial ad, and all that stuff, well then, do your OCI and get a job that way. Cool, great. That's what you should be doing. But you're talking maybe the top 10% of the class, 20% of the class. There's tons of
certainly.
There's tons of law schools. There are too many law schools. There are too many law students, even though things are dwindling down right now, or there's being a market correction, and there's not enough jobs. And so if you're not in that sort of upper echelon, you need to do something else to find a job. And the thing to be cognizant of those other jobs, most of the good jobs that you would look for are not on your employment board. They're not on monster.com or anything like that. Most legal jobs, most good associate lawyer jobs get filled in a sort of gray market of jobs that is filled through personal relationships, right? So for instance, if our firm decided we wanted to hire an associate, we would not put up a job posting. What we would do is reach out to our network of relationships in the community around here in Birmingham and say, hey, we've decided we think we want to bring somebody else on. Does anybody know anybody who's looking? And if you are not plugged into that network of relationships, that job will never appear to you if you're a student or a new lawyer. The only way you can get plugged into those sort of gray market jobs is if somehow you have an end to that network. So with that in mind, my biggest thing for law students and new lawyers is like, you have to get out of your comfort zone and meet people and network, go to events. The Birmingham Bar has a law student section that they allow law students to join and have law student specific events jointly with the greater bar a couple of times a year that allows law students to come in and meet people. Or if you're a new lawyer, get involved in your local bar, go to events. Don't stand against the wall in the corner and be like, this was good. All right, I'm here. Like, man, you got to be bold and get up and, fortune favors the bold. You've got to go up there and take risk and opportunities. And, more than likely it's not going to work the first time. That's the other thing that defeats people is they go and they try something like that one time and then they're like, oh, it didn't work and I gave up. Well, then no one should ever, be a fisher either, because, if you go fishing, if you don't catch anything the first time you cast, you don't quit and are like, I'm never fishing again. I mean, like, that doesn't make sense. So, if you're a new lawyer and actively looking for a job, you just got to be aware of the fact that jobs are out there, but they're just not going to be out there on public display. They're filled in these smaller networks of relationships, and you've got to figure out a way how to work your way into those networks.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I love the way that now like LinkedIn is set up in a way that kind of visualizes or allows people to visualize that probably had never understood that notion of circles of networks. And if you apply that same mentality of like LinkedIn, you have first and second and third degree connections, and you have to make certain connections to get more connections, and open up your network. I think what you were just describing is that exact same thing. And that's such great advice to go and expand your network, because a lot of times you get so many job postings if you put up a job, especially an associate or entry-level associate position where you'd have 0 levels of experience required. You're going to get hundreds of applications. So I think that's excellent advice. So I hope law students heed that and take it to heart and get out there and join a bar association and network. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time, Keith, sharing some great insights and experiences. I know it's been valuable for me, at least, to hear some of this, even though I'm not a law student anymore, and I know some of our listeners will find value in it as well. So thank you for taking the time today.
Absolutely. Great to do it.
And what is the best way for people to reach you if they have any additional questions?
Fastest, quickest way is probably just to hit me up on Twitter. I'm just at Associates Mind, or if you have something more, and I just say that because if someone's asking me a quick question, it's a lot easier just to be like, yes, boom, 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 and that's done. But otherwise, if there's something more substantive, just go to associatesmind.com and go to the contact page there. And I'm pretty good about responding to emails, and I always respond almost. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you everybody for watching and listening. And make sure you subscribe. Like I said on the last episode, we are now on podcast apps and podcast feeds. So look for us in the iTunes Store, Google Play Store, and your favorite podcast app. If you like us, leave us a review, 5 stars or whatever star system they use. Positive reviews are always appreciated and help bump us up the charts. So thank you. And remember to subscribe. So thank you for listening to Law School Strategy, How I Graduated from Law School with a Job.